not crest. There are moments that seem gentle enough to save a person who is falling apart, but the closer one looks, the clearer it becomes that such tenderness is only a thin veil draped over a wound that never stops bleeding. Vanessa turns to Joey at such a moment, when a mother's pride has been torn open by the cold gaze of her own daughter, when every attempt to move forward after loss is twisted into proof of betrayal. When every brief instant of peace is overshadowed by a question she cannot silence, is she searching for love, or merely running from the feeling of being condemned by Deanne? In Joey's arms, Vanessa feels as though there is finally a place where no one forces her to explain herself, where no one looks at her like a selfish woman betraying the memory of the past, where no one demands that she choose between pain and loneliness. Yet that is exactly what makes this relationship so dangerous. When a man becomes a refuge at the precise moment a woman is at her most broken, what begins to grow between them is not simply affection, but dependency, a desperate hunger to be understood, a need to cling to anything that keeps her from drowning in the feeling that the entire world has misunderstood her. Vanessa never imagined she would become the kind of person who had to protect her own happiness in secret, as though it were some shameful crime. She once believed that if her heart ever learned to beat for someone again, it would be a sign of rebirth, but reality is far crueler than that. Every time she looks in the mirror, she no longer sees a woman who simply wants the chance to love again. She sees a mother being judged by the daughter she loves most. Deanne's anger is not merely an outburst over Joey. What hurts Vanessa most is the feeling that her daughter no longer sees the exhaustion she has carried for so many months, no longer sees the loneliness she silently swallowed in order to keep their home from collapsing. Deanne sees Joey as an insult, but she sees Vanessa as someone who has stained the memory of their family with her own hands. That look cuts deeper than anything else. It forces Vanessa to ask herself whether she has truly done something wrong, or whether she is only being punished for daring to live like a woman who needs comfort and protection, instead of forever playing the role of a symbol of endurance. Joey understands all too well the weight of those silences. He is not naive enough to think that gentleness alone can repair a family that is already fractured. Yet the closer he grows to Vanessa, the more deeply he is drawn into a battle he can no longer avoid. At first, Joey believes he only needs to be her support, only needs enough patience to help Vanessa find her breath again. But Deanne's opposition turns everything into a cruel test. He begins to realize that in her eyes, he is not a man who loves her mother, but an outsider who entered at the exact moment the family was weakest in order to claim a place that does not belong to him. What tears at Joey is not merely rejection, but the fact that he cannot completely deny her suspicion. He knows he came into Vanessa's life when she was at her most vulnerable. That truth means that every gentle gesture of his, no matter how sincere, can be interpreted as manipulation. And it is then that Joey begins to entertain more dangerous thoughts. If sincerity is not enough to earn acceptance, should he rely on strategy instead, on calculated patience, on carefully timed acts of kindness designed to force this family to acknowledge him? Meanwhile, Deanne is far from being a simple, impulsive daughter jealous of her mother's private life. Her anger is much deeper and darker than that. What suffocates her is not only the image of Vanessa with Joey, but the feeling that she has been excluded from the truth for a very long time. She can endure pain, but she cannot endure being treated like the last child to learn that her family is changing direction. She can accept that her mother is fragile, but not that all the major changes have happened behind her back, as though her feelings are an inconvenience to be avoided. Inside Deanne, the pain of loss has transformed into a merciless defense mechanism. She no longer believes in delayed explanations. She no longer wants to hear anyone say that Vanessa also deserves happiness. To Deanne, that happiness has come too soon, too secretly, too smoothly, while the remains of the family still lie scattered like rubble no one has bothered to clear away. Joey becomes the symbol of everything she cannot control, and Vanessa becomes a traitor for allowing that symbol to enter too deeply before anyone else was ready. Deanna's distance does not come from a fleeting burst of temper. It is a deliberate withdrawal, a quiet punishment she inflicts on her mother. She begins to avoid family meals, ignore messages, refuse the meetings Donald tries to arrange. Every time Vanessa tries to move closer, Deanna steps farther away, not loudly, but decisively enough to turn a house once filled with memories into a suffocating space of waiting. That coldness drives Vanessa even more insane than harsh words would. If Deanna were still yelling, still crying, still accusing, at least it would prove there was still a bond strong enough between them to collide. But Deanna's silence feels like an endless sentence, turning Vanessa into a mother standing outside the locked door of her daughter's heart, knocking again and again without ever receiving an answer. Donald is the only one calm enough to see both sides, and for that very reason he becomes the one under the greatest pressure. He loves his mother and sees that Vanessa is truly exhausted, not selfishly indulging in some new romance. But he also understands Deanna, understands that children do not only suffer because of loss, but because they are forced to witness adults finding ways to move on that they themselves are not ready to accept. Donald tries to become the bridge between them, but that bridge is increasingly trampled by the opposing desperations on both sides. Vanessa wants him to help Deanna understand that her mother has not betrayed the family. Deanna wants him to face the truth that their mother has changed and no longer places her children's emotions above everything else. Donald begins to grow weary from translating the language of pain back and forth between them. He feels like a man trying to patch a roof in the middle of a storm, only to expose more cracks with every repair. But things only truly enter dangerous territory when Joey decides he will no longer stand on the sidelines. He understands that if he lets Deanna continue defining who he is, he will remain a shadow in her eyes forever. So Joey begins approaching this conflict more proactively. He does not attack, nor does he confront her openly. Instead, he chooses a strategy that is difficult to challenge. He appears exactly when the family needs someone to handle a crisis, discreetly helps Vanessa relieve small financial pressures, quietly takes charge of messy problems no one else wants to touch, and even creates moments that force Donald to admit he is genuinely trying. It is a silent kind of assault, made even more dangerous by the face of kindness it wears. Joey tells himself he is doing it for Vanessa, to protect the woman he loves from being dragged down by Deanna's stubbornness. But deep down, he knows he is entering a subtle power game. If he cannot win Deanna's heart, he will make the family acknowledge his value whether they want to or not. Deanna senses it almost immediately. Behind every kind gesture, she sees another step deeper into the structure of her family. That sharp awareness only fuels her anger further. She does not hate Joey merely because he is with Vanessa. She hates the way he behaves like a calm, reasonable man who knows how to help, how to wait, how to appear at exactly the right moment, as though he is rewriting his place in everyone's eyes. It makes Deanna feel as though she is the one who is hysterical, the one who refuses to grow up, the final obstacle keeping the family from moving into some stable future. And that is intolerable to her, because if she stays silent, all her suspicions will be buried beneath the polished surface of kindness. If she continues to resist, she will be seen as the selfish daughter punishing her mother. That trap pushes Deanna into increasingly negative reactions. She begins digging through small details, questioning the stretches of time Vanessa kept hidden, scrutinizing every sign that Joey may have inserted himself into her mother's life earlier than everyone claims. The deeper she digs, the more sleep she loses, the more she resembles someone consumed by obsession. But to Deanna, it is better to be called obsessed than to become the last person to realize her family has been restructured from within. Vanessa, meanwhile, is torn apart in a different way. She is both grateful and frightened by the way Joey protects her. At times she wants to give up, to let Deanna rage and simply hold on to the one thing that still brings her comfort. But every frown on her daughter's face, every tired glance from Donald as though waiting for a more mature decision, drags Vanessa back to her maternal instincts. She begins to live split in two, half wanting to embrace the new future Joey promises, half wanting to crawl back into the past if only to win one look from Deanne that still carries the warmth of before. The tragedy is that those two desires cannot coexist. The closer she moves toward Joey, the farther she drifts from Deanne. The more she tries to hold on to Deanne, the more she makes Joey understand that he is only ever loved conditionally. Vanessa realizes there is no path that does not hurt, only different wounds waiting at the end of each road. Donald eventually reaches the point where he can no longer remain in the middle. A small but bitter incident pushes him to the edge of choosing. When Deanne, in a fit of anger, accidentally sparks a confrontation in front of outsiders, turning the family's private fractures into gossip throughout Fairmont Crest, Vanessa nearly collapses completely. Joey immediately steps in to shield her, while Donald is forced to watch the two women most important to him look at each other like enemies. In that moment, he understands that his neutrality can no longer save anyone. If he keeps trying to please both sides, things will only drag on until one of them leaves for good. But if he chooses a side, he will become living proof that this family has split beyond repair. That torment changes Donald. He begins to be harsher with Deanne, forcing her to confront the fact that her anger is hurting everyone, not just Joey. At the same time, he turns on Vanessa too, pushing her to stop lying to herself that time alone will fix everything. He tells her with firm resolve that she cannot keep Joey and expect Deanne to calm down on her own without any real cost. That warning is what truly frightens Vanessa for the first time. Not the fear of losing face, not the fear of being judged, but the fear that one day Deanne's distance will become permanent. She begins to imagine holidays without her daughter, life milestones Deanne will no longer want to share with her, phone calls that will never be answered. That fear shakes Vanessa so badly that she wants to end things with Joey simply to save the last fragile thread connecting her to her child. But the tragedy is that when she stands before Joey, she cannot bring herself to be that cruel. Because out of everyone in her life, Joey is the only one who does not demand strength from her, who does not punish her for what she feels, who does not turn her vulnerability into evidence against her. He makes her feel that she is still someone worthy of tenderness, not just a failed mother trying to clean up the emotional wreckage of her family. Joey senses the danger of being left behind, and that fear reveals a darker side of him as well. He is no longer satisfied with the role of comforter. He wants Vanessa to choose him not as a temporary refuge, but as an irreversible future. From that point on, his gentleness begins to blend with ambition. He starts urging Vanessa to draw boundaries with Deanne, to stop allowing her daughter's emotions to control her life, to understand that every love comes at a price and that she cannot remain hidden forever in the gray zone. Though he still wears a calm expression, Joey increasingly resembles a man quietly wagering everything on this game. If Vanessa retreats because of Deanne, he will become the loser in a war he never openly declared. And Joey's not the kind of man who accepts defeat easily. Beneath those gentle eyes, a harder resolve begins to appear, the resolve of someone who believes he has invested too much to be pushed aside. Deanne, too, is driven into a corner in her own way. She realizes her anger is no longer enough to pull her mother back to her side. Vanessa is still hurt, still conflicted, but she does not turn away from Joey. That forces Deanne to face her deepest fear, that her mother may truly need this man more than Deanne wants to admit. That truth cuts through her pride like a blade. She begins to wonder whether she is really fighting to protect the family or desperately trying to preserve her place at the center of her mother's heart. The more she asks herself that question, the more she despises her own fragility. And so Deanne becomes even harder, even colder, as though refusing to yield can somehow transform pain into strength. But beneath that icy exterior is a daughter in quiet panic, terrified of losing her mother in the slowest and most legitimate way possible, not through death, but through replacement. The climax of this war does not come in one explosive moment, but in the instant when everyone understands there is no going back. Vanessa looks at Deanne and sees not a storm that can pass, but a crack that has sunk all the way into the foundation. Donald looks at his mother and sibling and realizes he can mediate meetings, but he cannot be the one to make the first concession for either of them. Joey looks at Vanessa and knows he is about to demand something cruel. Either she comes toward him with all her will, or he will remain nothing more than a floating life raft in her despair, never a shore she can truly reach. And Deanna, after all the anger and rejection, is finally forced to face the most painful truth of all. What she hates is not only Joey, but the realization that this love proves her mother no longer lives entirely for her children. At Fairmont Crest, schemes do not always take the form of openly sinister plans. Sometimes the real scheme is the way people use hurt as leverage, silence as punishment, kindness as occupation, and love as a weapon that forces others to choose. Vanessa is trapped between two forms of power, the power of a man who makes her feel alive again, and the power of a daughter who can make her die slowly in guilt. Joey moves deeper into this family with an outward calmness, but underneath it lies a will that refuses to be rejected. Deanna fights as if she is protecting the last soul of the family, but the harder she fights, the farther she pushes her mother away. Donald tries to keep the bridge from collapsing, but that bridge is trembling beneath the weight of too many secrets, wounds, and prides. In the end, Vanessa's greatest hope may not be a joyful wedding or promises of a peaceful future. Perhaps what she longs for most is simply a day when Deanna can look at her without seeing betrayal. A day when Donald no longer has to stand in the middle and strain himself as the family's peacemaker. A day when Joey can love her without needing to prove he has the right to exist within this family. But the simplest things are sometimes the most impossible luxuries. And if the moment of true choice finally comes, between the man who makes her feel loved and the daughter she cannot bear to lose, Vanessa's heart may not lead her to happiness the way she once hoped. It may lead her somewhere far crueler, where every right decision is also a decision that leaves someone shattered. In that place, no one wins completely. There are only people who love each other at the wrong time, then watch their family turn into a battlefield of emotions from which there is no retreat.